Hello and welcome to the Capital Conversation with me, Michael Hayman. Now, in Parliament, he's a peer of the realm. In business, he provides beer to the nation. My guest today is Lord Bilimoria of Chelsea, the founder of one of the UK's most iconic brands, Cobra Beer. When asked by the Evening Standard what an average day entails, he responded simply this: there is no average day. And we're going to find out why. Lord Bilimoria, welcome to the Capital Conversation. Pleasure to have you on the show. We'll get on to average days soon enough, but just frame Cobra for us. It's something that people have, I'm sure, are aware of in restaurants, bars, but tell us a little bit about, introduce Cobra Beer to us.
Thank you, Michael. Great to be with you and great to be on the show. Cobra was a student idea. When I was a law student at Cambridge University, came up with the idea through dissatisfaction of a lot of the beers I was drinking, particularly the lagers that I found just too fizzy and gassy and difficult to drink, and a love of English ale, which I love to this day. And I said, well, how can I produce a beer that has the refreshment of a lager and the smoothness of an ale combined, and also a beer that would go with all food, in particular Indian food? And that was the ambition, that was the goal, that was the idea.
The starting point. And you nearly called it Panther.
That was, the first name we chose was Panther. We could have chosen any name. And for some reason, the customers we were trying to sell the first batch of beer to from Bangalore, where we developed the beer with India's finest brewmaster in Mysore breweries, for some reason, customers didn't want to buy Panther. So then the second...
So that was the customer testing. But at this stage, you're effectively a young student type. But,
no money, £20,000 of debt to pay off.
And you're going to create a world-beating business.
And, brew the finest ever Indian beer, make it a global beer brand. That was the ambition then. That is still the ambition now.
So you've used the word ambition. I mean, and that that comes across in your story. And obviously, over the years, I've got to know you, and that I think is a really good word for you. But when you think about where the ambition comes from, where you find it, how might you explain that?
Entrepreneurship is all about coming up with an idea and then making it happen. And it's about being creative, it's about being innovative, and it's all summed up really in your attitude. With Cobra, our motto, our vision is to aspire and achieve against all odds with integrity. So here you are, aspiring to build a global beer brand when you've got nothing, you've got no experience in manufacturing, let alone brewing beer, and you want to create a global beer brand. You've got no money, you've got debt to pay off, you've got all this odds stacked against you with giant competitors. The biggest Indian beer brand in India to this day was 8 years ahead of us in the UK market. Carlsberg was in every Indian restaurant you walked into. And there we were setting up a beer brand from scratch against all odds.
And was there an ambition at the beginning that you thought, I can own this market, we can make it happen?
Absolutely. Yes, because you can only do that if you, as an entrepreneur, have that one word that sets entrepreneurs apart from other people, and that is guts. You've got to have the guts to do it. And you've got to have the guts to stick with it when others would give up, because it's a tough journey when you've got all the odds stacked against you.
Were you aware of risk? I mean, was that early on? I mean, I know there are other chapters in the story where you've nearly lost the business, you've won it back, but I mean, risk seems to have been the fellow traveller in your business story.
You're always taking risks as an entrepreneur, but you're trying to manage that risk. You're trying to take calculated risks. But on the whole, you're going against the grain. On the whole, you're going against the textbooks. I mean, I would have failed Michael Porter's 5 forces market entry analysis, the famous Harvard Business School professor. I would have failed every one of the 5. Everyone
got 11 minutes of the first
everyone tells you not to do it. Your own family tells you, please don't do it. You're a qualified chartered accountant, you've got a law degree from Cambridge, go into banking, go to something what they perceive as being more secure. Don't do this. Don't risk it all. And of course, you go for it. And you go for it and you believe that you've got something that's different, you've got something that's better, you've got something that's going to change the marketplace forever.
But when you go back to the realities of your early story, you're selling door to door at the beginning, you're trying to get your first big break. What was the first big break? When did you know that you were onto something?
You get an idea of that very quickly, because when you're selling your product, first you've got to get the customers to try it. Once we got customers to try it, we saw instantly that they loved the product Cobra. They found they liked the taste of the beer, but they also found that they loved drinking it with food. It went very well with the food. And the key test was getting the reorders. We got a 99% reorder. Within a few weeks, we're getting reorder after reorder. And then you've got...
So you've got a foodies product. You've got something that goes, you want to sell with food. That's how you take that on in terms of you want to get it into pubs, you want to get it into all sorts of different markets. I mean, how does that journey expand from that early stage startup into something that you can find in pubs, restaurants all over the country?
You have to have a strategy. We call ours a breakthrough strategy, where I didn't have the money to advertise or put my beer on the shelves of supermarkets and then see it gather dust there because nobody knows your brand. So I've had to build up the awareness of the brand. The strategy was build it in the Indian restaurants, the curry restaurants. Everyone in this country loves Indian food, loves curry.
Curry and a Cobra,
part of our
nothing
way
more.
of life. And what do they drink? The most favorite drink with curry and Indian food is beer. And so Cobra now is in over 98% of all the curry restaurants, Indian restaurants in the UK. And we've now got that, which will always be our foundation. But we're also in all the supermarkets. We're also in all the off-license. We're also now in Lebanese, in Turkish, in Thai, in Chinese, in gastropubs, in casual dining, and exported to about 40 countries around the world.
But you mentioned that a lot of this hasn't been achieved by very large advertising budgets. I mean, a lot of this has been word of mouth. It's been innovation. I mean, I always remember early on the bottles stood out. I mean, people used to talk about, the very large Cobra bottles. I mean, is that part of the story here? Kind of innovating the product, innovating ideas that get people to talk about it. Is that the strategy?
The innovation and creativity are at the heart of any entrepreneurial story. That you've got to be able to come up with this idea that is going to change things. And you've got to be able to convert obstacles into opportunities. So our double-sized big bottles, which is to this day, 80% of beer sold in India is in those big bottles around the country in India. Over here, nobody knew about those. They said, no, we don't want those. We want small bottles. We want draft beer. No, actually, this is the authentic way beer is sold. Now, wait for this. Fast forward today, our number one selling stock keeping unit, and we have big bottles, and we have small bottles, and we have can, and we have draft beer, is our double size 660 ml bottle. And if you go on a supermarket shelf now, you'll see every major beer brand, whether it's Peroni or all of them, will have Heineken, will have big double, and we were the first movers, and it's our number one selling
How
stock
have you
keeping
found
unit.
that, tastes have changed over the years in terms of, obviously, there are fears about alcohol now, there are different dynamics with different generations. How has the business had to evolve in the face of those sorts of changes?
I do believe that there is a saying in life, I think this applies in life, you either adapt or die. And one has got to adapt to the changing world. And one's got to be continually innovative. It's got to be a sort of restless innovation. And we've never stood still. We started with the original Cobra. Fast forward, not only expanding the different types of packaging, but we brought out a non-alcoholic Cobra, Cobra Zero. And now there's more and more for demand for non-alcoholic beers, and ours is one of the best, acknowledged as one of the best in the market. Then we brought out a gluten-free product. Then we brought out a double fermented Cobra brewed in Belgium from one of the finest breweries. And now we've got an India Pale Ale called Malabar, which is phenomenal. It's the only India Pale Ale IPA that goes well with food.
And you're working with a big partner now in Molson Coors. How does that change the nature of the business when you're working with a global brand and you're an entrepreneur? How does that affect the sort of, or I guess enhance the Cobra story?
And again, taking the adapt or die theme further, when you merge an entrepreneurial, fast-growing company with the founder entrepreneur running it with a giant global brewer like Molson Coors, a multi-billion-dollar company, you put the two together, you try to get the best of both worlds, where you get the distribution, manufacturing, all the financial clout of Molson Coors put together with the entrepreneurial spirit and drive of Cobra. And with me as the chairman, continually driving it forward every day, it works well. But you have to work at it to make it work well.
Yes, and how does the entrepreneur stay alive over the long term, not just working with other partners, but in terms of, we're going to get on in the second half to some of your other interests, but in terms of the entrepreneur in you, in terms of how you keep that spirit going, how you keep that ambition, those guts. I mean, are there coping strategies? What have you learned over time, the advice you might give to viewers?
What you've always got to do, I believe, is take a long-term view. And when I say long-term, I'm talking a minimum 5 years. You're always looking 5 years ahead at any one point of time. When I was dispatching our first container of Cobra from Bangalore, brewed and bottled in Bangalore, to the UK, I had carried out a 5-year, month-by-month forecast of Cobra. and I'd never sold a bottle of beer in my life.
Did you meet the forecast?
We beat it.
You beat the forecast.
Yeah. So I think that long-term view is essential.
And do you have to keep on doing that? I mean,
Yes.
does every year, and what, just very briefly, what's the entrepreneurial sort of steps for you now when you're running a successful international company?
So now, to me, I've got a 1-year plan and a 5-year plan, and that means the new products that I brought out, rolling them out, establishing them, growing the brand, growing the markets around the world, and I've already got the next new products in my mind, which I'm going to roll out in the next 5 years as well.
Right, now that might sound like a busy workload, but when we come back, we're going to turn our attention from the Cobra founder to the business campaigner, because there's a big story to tell. We'll be right back. Welcome back. My guest today is Cobra Beer founder Lord Bilimoria. Now, Lord Bilimoria, we were speaking earlier about your role as Cobra Beer founder, but you're also vice president of the CBI, the Confederation of British Industry, and you're very likely to become its president this summer. Now, in terms of that role, interesting, because you don't normally associate entrepreneurs with the CBI. You see it as big business, but it also gives you I guess, a seat at the heart of business in terms of the campaigning voice for what happens next. Give us a sense of the agenda that you're taking forward and actually what you found out in the CBI. Now you're a big part of it.
It's a great privilege to be given this opportunity to be vice president and, in due course, president of the CBI. It's the first time, to our knowledge, it's an entrepreneur who's going to be in the role. It's usually a FTSE 100 chair. It's the first time it's somebody from a minority background. I'm originally from India. And I'm really looking forward to it, because I think that there is a huge job to be done in putting business at the heart of this country. Because it's business that creates the jobs, that pays the taxes, that pay for the public services that we all benefit from.
So is your starting point that it's not at the heart at the moment?
People, I think, A, take business for granted, and B, sadly, there's quite often a very negative image about business. And I want to highlight the good that business does,
Right.
not only in what I've just spoken about, but the good that businesses do in putting back into the community. That so many businesses like our Cobra Foundation,
Right.
where we put back into the community on a daily basis.
But some would argue that business has only got itself to blame, because actually there's lots of examples of bad businesses as well. I mean, is it just the case that business is misrepresented, or do you think business has got to do more to actually make itself the good citizen?
Business has always got to do its best to do things. It's not just good enough to be the best in the world, you've got to be the best for the world. And it's not just what you do, but how you do it. So it's very important that business does things the right way and operates with integrity. And I think there's a huge job to be done to highlight the great good business that takes place in this country. We keep complaining about our productivity not being good enough in this country, and there's a huge productivity challenge. On the other hand, the top 10% of our companies are the most productive in the world. So we've got the best of the best.
Because I was going to ask,
here.
I mean, because you go around the world with your work, I mean, when you look at the UK as a place for business, its reputation for business, what do people think?
Well, the UK has historically had a fantastic reputation.
Historically?
The Great Britain campaign
Right.
is very good, because it highlights so much of what is great about this country, our institutions, everything across the board, whether it's cultural, from music to drama to museums to having the best universities in the world along with the United States of America. Our manufacturing, our high-end manufacturing is world-class, whether it's aerospace or beer or automobiles. So our accountants, our lawyers, our professional services, we are fantastic. And I think our financial services, top 2 in the world, along with New York, London financial centres. So we've got a lot going for us. We're still, with 65 million people, the 6th largest economy in the world.
How do our recent politics change things?
I think we've got to continue on the path of Britain always being one of the most open economies in the world. Britain always being the place in the world that you know you will get a fair deal and a fair hearing. Where does somebody go to get a fair trial or to get a case resolved where they know it'll be justice at its best? It's the UK and London. So we've got a reputation for that around the world. We must never lose that.
If you were to look at the forward, I mean, you've been very vocal in the past about Brexit and about the pitfalls, but now we are approaching the Brexit deadline, it's happening. If you were to put the hat on in terms of I've got to make this work, what happens next? What are the things that you would do? Well, I presumably you will do as CBI president, yes, to actually make a success of a position that you haven't historically always agreed with.
So you have to, as I said before, adapt or die. And many people made the analysis and decision that on balance it was better to remain in the European Union than leave it. Now we're leaving. On 31st January 2020, Britain is out of the European Union. Now, it's what we do when we're out, make the most of it in a way that enhances this economy and business. That's going to be the challenge, because whatever way you look at it, Europe makes up 50% of our trade and our business. America makes up 18%. Those two areas, Europe and America, is over 2/3 of our trade.
Do you think that, that adapt or die, to what degree do you get a sense that business, big business especially, the CBI historically very pro-Remain, it's going to have to adapt, it's going to have to evolve now. To what degree do you get a sense that process is underway in terms of making the new status quo work?
Well, I think it's very important that government and business work together, because the CBI, people think it's just big business, but actually it is representing 190,000 businesses, employing over 7 million people across every region of the United Kingdom. So we do get to know what business wants on the ground, and we can then represent that to government and say, now, this is what business wants. Let's work together to get the best for business and for the country.
And behind the trade deals, these are going to be the businesses that trade. And in terms of what they need to prosper,
yes,
do you get a sense that this government sees business as the priority that perhaps you do?
Well, it has got to see it, because government has to work with business for its own sake, for the country's sake, because it's business that is going to generate the jobs, that's going to pay the revenue, that's going to generate the taxes that the government needs to provide the public services.
But this last election wasn't, it didn't really showcase business well, certainly not in any positive way. If you look at both campaigns, business barely featured.
No, I think that on the whole, the current government's business policies are pretty business friendly. Generally speaking, they are very pro-business. Now it's a question of making the most of it. And how competitive can we be? Can we have tax rates that are competitive? Can we be attractive for inward investment? Can we make sure we have frictionless trade with Europe that we have at the moment, as close as possible to that going forward? Can we continue to have trading relationships with the 50-odd countries, over 50 countries the European Union has trade deals with? Can we make sure we have those trade deals as well? Can we want to do a trade deal with America, do a good trade deal with America that doesn't jeopardize our European Union arrangement, which is 50% of our trade? These are the challenges ahead.
And I'm sure that people in government listening to that would say, yes, we agree. But also you hear things like sort of the end of entrepreneur relief. You hear all sorts of sort of signals that perhaps the place of business at the top table might be changing. Do you...
I don't think that at all. I think that the government is very business friendly. I think one has to continually make government realize and to remind them how important entrepreneurship is. It is at the heart. SMEs are the driving engine of any economy.
So entrepreneur relief should stay?
Absolutely should stay. Without a doubt, I would say that as an entrepreneur, it should stay, because you're encouraging startups, you're encouraging people to grow businesses. You're encouraging that if they were to sell that business, they will get entrepreneur relief. So you're encouraging growth and value and creating businesses and creating jobs. That's the whole idea of entrepreneur relief.
And I've heard you talk about it before, but the nature of change of the British enterprise scene because of things like innovation in the way that entrepreneurs are supported, lots of different schemes, I guess, to back British enterprise. But you started your business up in the 1980s. Things have changed, right, in terms of the scene here?
Things have changed for the better. It is now, there's so much more access to finance, of different forms of finance.
So better funded.
You've got better funded, including crowdfunding, the British Business Bank. You've got all sorts of great forms of funding that were not available when I started.
Are we a more ambitious country?
You've got technology that didn't exist then, let alone mobile communications, the internet that we take for granted, that is making it so much easier to do business around the world. I think we in Britain are, from a tech point of view, we're now right at the heart of the tech revolution as well. We're an entrepreneurial country. We were not an entrepreneurial country in the 80s. Today, we are seen as an entrepreneur and respected as an entrepreneurial country. London is one of the most entrepreneurial cities in the world. So we've come a long way, and I'm very confident about the prospects for this country and the prospects for entrepreneurship. And government has got to continue to encourage and be a catalyst. Government has a very important role to be a catalyst to create the right environment for entrepreneurship and innovation to thrive.
And I guess, you know, its first big sort of reveal will be the spring budget in terms of how it is seen to be enterprise friendly. When you look at the sort of things that it might do, could do going forward to actually, I guess, continue that heritage, what would the advice be if and when you're asked for it?
So you've got a government that has made various pledges in terms of infrastructure spending. You've got interest rates at very low levels at the moment, where you've got an argument that you have the ability to raise funds as a government to invest in infrastructure. Infrastructure investment is hugely important for productivity, for encouraging inward investment, for ease of business, for ease of travel, all the benefits that go for infrastructure investment. However, you've also got to raise money through taxes. What's the best way to raise money through taxes? Is to make sure you have a growing economy and a growing businesses that generate more jobs, that pay more taxes. It's not by putting up taxes, I believe, is a way of raising more taxes. So you've got to make your economy competitive.
Competitive economy. We're right out of time, but one word answer, HST, stay or go?
As the Chancellor of the University of Birmingham, Birmingham is a very important city for this country, and it's a thriving city that is going places.
I think that's a stay or a go. Who knows? It's right. We're right out of time. That's all we have time for. Thanks to my guest, Lord Bilimoria of Chelsea, a campaigning leader who's proved match fit for turbulent times. Central to his story is the guts to go for it and a track record to match. And if you're looking for more insights from entrepreneurs made of the right stuff, join me next time on the Capital Conversation. I'll see you then.